Viewers, you are watching the Policy Times, India's only channel on public policy advocacy and foreign affairs. So today we have with us Dr. James Nedumpara, who is an expert on foreign trade, especially from the legal aspect of it. So thank you so much for giving us the bite. So how do you see the global trading system or infrastructure working currently?
So when you think about the global trading system, the main linchpin of the global trading system is the WTO. The WTO has now completed 24 years almost. This system is now going through a mini crisis, in the sense that the negotiations of the WTO hasn't really progressed the way the founding fathers actually envisaged. And secondly, the appellate body, which is the apex dispute settlement body within the WTO, is almost semi-non-functional at the moment. So these have implications in terms of respecting the trade agreements, because if the dispute settlement mechanism fails, then trade agreements have no particular utility or value. Right. So this is a major concern at the moment. So my own feeling is that now there are so many forces working against any kind of a multilateral engagement in the field of trade, and that is the major concern at the moment.
So how do you describe the appellate crisis now? What are the issues that are coming up on the body, and what are the areas that body is not able to address the issue?
The appellate board is a standing body in the field of international dispute settlement. It has got 7 members, and 3 members hear a particular dispute at a time. Recently, after 2017, the vacancies that arise in the appellate body in view of the retirement of some people have not been filled up. So at the moment, only 3 appellate body members are working. The remaining 4 vacancies have not been filled up because of the resistance on the part of the United States. And the concern is that if the appellate body is not completely fully functional, then there will be significant lag and delay in the settlement of disputes. And after 2019, because the remaining appellate body members will also retire in 2019, so we are actually heading towards a situation where there will be no appellate body in 2020. Right. So that is a major concern. And if trade agreements cannot be enforced, as I mentioned earlier, trade agreements have no particular value. Anyone can basically violate an agreement and can go scot-free. So that is a major concern mainly from the point of view of the non-fulfillment of the vacancies.
Right. Now there are 2, I think, in the global economic system, there are 2 ways of doing trade. One is bilateral agreements, right. One is multilateral agreement. Right. Now WTO, we know that WTO leads the multilateral agreement in terms of taking the global governance trade infrastructure. Now we saw RCEP, TPP was another kind of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. In Asia, we had the RCEP negotiations which was going on. How do you see they are taking shape? Do you see that under the banner of WTO, this kind of multilateral agreements can bring some change and revamp?
You know, the multilateral agreement under the WTO and the regional trade agreement coexist. They basically dovetail. They are complementary. The understanding is that the regional trade agreements are also trade liberalizing, and over a period of time, they contribute towards openness, liberalization within international trade. At the moment, the problem is that the regional trade agreements are happening all across the world. There are so many regional trade agreements now. There are around 600 of them. 300 odd agreements have been concluded already. Several such agreements are currently being negotiated. These agreements, to an extent, will result in a splintering of the multilateral trading system, because the rules of the regional trade agreement are not actually compliant with the WTO legal system. And the problem is mainly accentuated by the lack of progress in trade negotiation of the WTO. So you have got the WTO agreement concluded way back in 1995. It has not been modified or improved upon significantly after that. Then you have got a large number of mega regional trade agreements.
Right.
For instance, the TPP agreement, the RCEP agreement, and you also have got highly ambitious agreements like the Canada-European Union Free Trade Agreement called the CETA. These agreements have got WTO plus provisions, and they touch upon areas including government procurement, electronic commerce, several new areas, digital economy issues. So the WTO at the moment is actually a fairly old agreement. You can't say it is a 21st century agreement. and there is a need to really update the WTO system. But in view of the the conflicts, the lack of harmony within the WTO members, the negotiations are not going anywhere at the moment.
So, thinking from the global perspective, there is a sense, that is complete a sense of chaosness in terms of taking a clear position to it, as you rightly described that WTO needs a revamp. Now, who or what set of countries should take the leadership now in such a situation? Considering India being a dominant economic player globally, what position should India take from here?
So generally, the GATT and the WTO was spearheaded by the United States. So the US was the main driving force behind these agreements for a long period of time. After, I think 2000, or you can say in the 21st century, the United States has basically gone back. And the European Union hasn't actually come up with any leadership as well. So to an extent, I think there is a certain amount of lack of leadership. And the United States now is very keen on undermining some of the provisions which they were party to negotiation or introducing in the first place. And many areas, including agriculture trade, services trade, they are beset with various kinds of distortions. The world is actually, if you look at the global trade, there are significant distortions in all markets. Significant distortions. In China, in agriculture trade, in dairy trade, in farm products trade, there are significant distortions. So the current agreement, the WTO agreement at the moment is unable to really take care of some of these distortions. Then you have got the regional trade agreements, right? The regional trade agreements do not really reflect a global interest. It actually reflects the interest of the
regional interests.
The regional interest of the parties to those agreements.
Right.
So that is why I said there is an overall lack of leadership. Maybe countries including India can actually come to the fore, provided their own sensitivities are taken care of in the system. That is a difficult challenge because in a multilateral system there are thousands of issues, and it is very difficult to forge a consensus on all the outstanding issues and come up with an agreement.
Right. Now, services-led, export-led growth or economic model is very important for countries. We have seen Japan's rise as economic power, China's rise recently, Korea's, Taiwan's. Now, considering India has to take on export as a priority and actually do something to contribute. Now, we saw there has been recent dip in the export, but it's picking up now.
Right.
But it has not been one of the priority areas in the economic model to create employment domestically and to do this. What are the strength areas the country should focus on now, and how should political leadership take lessons from it? How do you see actually India should take export as a priority, and what are the areas India should focus?
Every country has to take export as a priority because only export earnings can bring in balance of payments. So it is important for every country.
Right.
If you look at, Japan in the 1980s did that. China's economic growth has been basically propelled on its export policy. China has been the most important exporter in recent times. So every country needs a kind of an export-led growth. Right. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a significant amount of overcapacity in the world. Most of the countries actually produce more than what their consumers can consume. So there is significant amount of overcapacity, surplus production in many products, and that's why I said it is very difficult to penetrate the market. So most of the countries would really retain to maintain their restrictions or maintain their trade distortions in some of these sectors. So unless a very comprehensive unless a very comprehensive reform in international trade is made, it will be difficult to penetrate foreign markets. Then the question, so every country, as I mentioned, really wants an export-led growth.
Right.
But when there is already oversaturation in those markets, how can we really export? So my own suggestion is that as a country we have to improve the domestic consumption. Domestic consumption has to be, I think even for China, domestic consumption is so important. Why there is so much of backlash against the Chinese export-led growth? They are eating into the share of other countries. If you look at the United States, some of their industries have basically been wiped out because of the Chinese exports. So every country will have to enhance or expand the consumption within the domestic market.
Last question I want to ask and understand that a lot of FTAs, India signed a lot of FTAs to different bilateral FTAs, regional FTAs, mega regional FTAs, and then it's also part of the international trading system. The reaction, we did research on that, the Indian industry has not been able to leverage the benefits been given through different FTAs. What are the why has not Indian industry been able to leverage that, and how can Indian industry engage and benefit more from this developments?
I don't think that it is very accurate to say that Indian industry hasn't benefited. If you look at any industry, it is extremely important to be part of the global value chain or to the supply chain for that matter. If you want to remain competitive within your own market, you need to have cheaper access to inputs.
Right.
And investment mostly happen through global value chains.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you look at the trade balance alone, it may give a very distorted picture.
Mm-hmm.
But my own feeling is that India, to an extent, has benchmarked with the global economies in various products. To give an example, in automobile, Indian automobile exports are extremely competitive. And I think that happened only because India has been party to some of these agreements. When you really look at the trade balance, it may give a completely distorted picture.
Right. Okay. So any last suggestion to industry, to different stakeholders, policymakers, in terms of what role we should play now from here on?
I think when all these trade agreements are being negotiated, industry will have, in most situations, a very narrow interest. They may only look at their own product. But if you really want to look at India's approach to some of these trade negotiations, you need to look at the interest of the country. So sometimes, in every game, some people may actually lose out a little bit. It is impossible to sign a trade deal by satisfying everyone. But if you look at the overall aggregate welfare of the country, then I feel that it is better for India to be part of these international trading arrangements rather than take a backseat. Right.
So viewers, we had Dr. James Nedumpara, who heads the Center for Trade and Investment Law at IIFT, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Perhaps India's undisputed number one and the most important body to advise and suggest government of India on different trade negotiations, trade EXIM policy and issues. So you were watching the Policy Times. Thank you.